Hello, Canna friends, and thank you again for joining us. I'm Denise Beach, and my co-host Neil is back with us. And we are so honored this evening to have Senate Minority Leader Greg Taylor with us this evening. He's going to be answering some pretty important questions that we've been having about what happened this legislative season, that kind of thing. Before we get to him, we want to remind everybody about our website. You can join as a iNormal member on there. We have a donation button. Don't forget to check out our store. If you guys haven't been, there's some really fun stuff on there. We get a portion of the proceeds to help join our fight. The billboards we had up, we're planning some stuff for this summer, so we could really use the help. We do have a fundraiser on there as well. We have these weed leaf socks and some 420 hats. That is limited time though on those. So when they're gone, they're just gone. And that is just a fundraiser, so we would appreciate it. We do have lots of other things on our website. There's really interesting news articles on there. There's updates on all our 420 events. So do make sure you keep up on those because we'll be constantly updating. We're going to be having 420 events across the whole state. So definitely always go on our website. Make sure you check that out and see what's going on. So Neil, what news do you have for us?
Oh, we have a little bit of news here and there. Thank you very much, Denise. Before we get into the news, let me tell you that while we are not a journalistic enterprise, we are very much prejudiced towards the advancement of cannabis, especially here in Indiana. With that said, we do endeavor to ensure our stories are true and accurate. We use trusted sources like Marijuana Moment, Leafly, National Normal, and others. We do fact check our stories, and we are firm believers in truth and always try to make sure that what we say is accurate. Let us know if you find that we made a mistake someplace. We can own up to it. We're big kids. Getting into things here, the legal cannabis industry is a good place to work for nearly 500,000 employees. As of this past January, Leafly, in their 2022 Cannabis Jobs Report, stated that 428,059 cannabis jobs existed in legal cannabis states. Cannabis is now a $25 billion industry in the U.S., according to the article. Federal prohibition prevents the U.S. Department of Labor's Bureau of Labor Statistics from counting state legal marijuana jobs. Since 2017, Leafly's news and data teams have filled that gap with a yearly analysis of employment in the legal cannabis sector. Whitney Economics, a global leader in cannabis and hemp business consulting, data and economic research, has partnered with Leafly on the project since 2019. Leafly has always been a trusted source of information for the cannabis community. Mm-hmm. The United States Department of Agriculture, aka the USDA, has released a benchmark survey on hemp. It's the first assessment by the federal government of the size of the hemp industry, and it's showing some serious numbers, like the hemp market's value was $821 million last year, with over 54,000 acres of hemp being sown across the country. The National Institute of Drug Abuse, NIDA, is funding some research to determine the best regulatory models for legal cannabis. NIDA posted for applicants to sign on to the new study. A similar bid was advertised in 2019, but recently expired without any takers. An agency spokesperson told Marijuana Moment, quote, policies around the cannabis products, including whole plant cannabis, and cannabis constituent compounds in the United States and globally continue to evolve and far outpace the knowledge needed to determine the public health impacts of these changes. Rather than seeing what works and applying it, this agency, which has never been a friend of cannabis, apparently wants to continue throwing every roadblock possible in the way of legalization. And from Leafly, we get a report about President Biden's Supreme Court choice, Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, and how she might vote if confronted with a cannabis action before the High Court. Judges are frequently either prohibited from voicing positions on social issues that they may pass judgment on at some point in the future, or at least they're discouraged from doing so. Several organizations have looked, but have found nothing one way or another on Brown Jackson's record. Her background, however, indicates she would give a fair hearing on ending prohibition. She has served as a public defender, a criminal defense attorney, and a criminal court judge. She has a perspective that might sway the entire court's opinion in the favor of cannabis should the issue ever reach the Supreme Court. 25 of Indiana's top cannabis advocacy organizations and individuals gathered for an online summit last night to form a coalition under the name of the Indiana Cannabis Council. We had representatives from each Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians, and Greens. Not only does the council give us a broad political reach, it expands our ability to reach out to more people throughout the state. Indiana NORML has had county units for a couple of years now, but by uniting with other organizations, we can all share resources and advance legalization in Indiana. It takes big numbers to move the needle, especially here in Hoosier land. Hopefully the council can step the numbers up and we can finally get legalization in Indiana. And that's all the news that fits. Denise, back to you.
Thank you. That coalition is really exciting. I think rather than having all these little cells all over, if we can all unite and make a stand, hopefully, maybe our voice will be heard a little bit louder. So that's exciting.
Well, that's the idea. You're always stronger when you stand together.
Definitely. Well, as I mentioned earlier, we're so honored to have Senate Minority Leader Greg Taylor with us tonight. We really appreciate you taking the time out to be with us. We know you're still in session, Senator Taylor, so it is an honor for us to have you here, and we appreciate it. So let's lead off with what happened to all our cannabis bills? Why are they all dead? Do you have any idea what happened?
Well, as you know, when we talked earlier this year, we talked about the fact that the leadership, both in the House and the Senate, were not very optimistic about giving cannabis legalization in any form and the opportunity to make it to the floor. And so what we did as several Democrats and Republicans, we all filed legislation, be it for recreational marijuana or medical. For example, my legislation was for medical cannabis. And what ended up happening was that anything associated with cannabis, even the hemp bill, did not get a hearing in the Senate. So we were not able to get anybody on record from the caucus perspectives on a vote for legalization of medical and or recreational marijuana. However, in the interim, there was a piece of legislation that had to do with the criminal side of things. So our new senator from up in the LaPorte area, Senator Rodney Pohl, was able to have an amendment on the floor of the Senate that would decriminalize mere possession of small amounts of marijuana, and we did get our colleagues on the other side of the aisle on the record for that. We actually had some support. I think we ended up getting 14 votes, which means 3 Republicans supported it, and the remainder of the Republican Party voted against it. So as of today, and we still got a little ways to go. We don't end till next Tuesday, I think. But we haven't been able to get them on the roll call vote on any of the medical or recreational marijuana legislation.
Oh, so basically they don't want to say yes or no, but they don't want us to know how they stand.
Yes, and that's political. The fact that medical marijuana as well as recreational marijuana has overwhelming support in the state of Indiana, be it if you're a Republican or a Democrat, it crosses party lines. The medical portion, especially after a state like Mississippi, as you might know, finally passed medical marijuana, which I believe makes the 37th state in the United States of America that has some form of legalization of cannabis. And they don't want their members to be on the record voting on this, because they know that if they vote no, that it's going to cause problems back at home.
So I would just like to reiterate to our viewers, we've really been pounding about to get out and register to vote and go vote. So kind of what I'm hearing Senator Taylor say is that the people that don't want to have a hearing or go on record for a vote is because they need your vote to keep their jobs. And if they vote no, and the majority of Hoosiers want cannabis legal, I mean, every poll shows that, they're afraid they're going to be voted out. So we really need to make sure you know who you're voting for, what they stand for. They won't go on record, but I think there's other, how else can we find out where people stand, Senator Taylor?
Well, here's what I would say. I think you should concentrate your efforts on Senator Rod Bray and Speaker Todd Houston. Those are the two leaders of the respective houses. Rod Bray is the leader of the Senate. Speaker Houston is the leader of the House of Representatives. And, you know, Rod Bray, for example, represents the Mooresville, Martinsville, Morgan County area. And then Todd Houston represents Noblesville/Hamilton County area. And if I were to talk about where you need to put forth your efforts, it's getting those two gentlemen off of compliance with not having anybody vote for cannabis. Let the people, let the legislators, and not two people decide whether or not we have legalization of some form in Indiana for cannabis. Because
that's great advice.
Right. So if I would find out which one of your members lives in those districts. Again, the district where Rod Bray represents in the Senate, and a district where Todd Houston represents in the House, and have them inundate them with information. Talk to them about the legalization in other states and what it's done, how it's changed the outlook when it comes to cannabis in a total. And then the second phase, talk about how Indiana's losing out because we have people in Indiana traveling to states like Michigan, Ohio, and Illinois actually purchasing these products, and then we're making them a criminal by driving back to Indiana. And that's just not how we do it. We didn't do that with alcohol. We regulated it. That's how we control the distribution. We control the consumption to people less than it should only be is prohibited for people less than 21. And you know, to me, that's the three-pronged test. First, get to the leaders. Second, talk about how we've lost the opportunity to our neighboring state. They're getting tax revenue that we should be receiving. And then last but not least, talk about how it's helping benefit people. And we can get all the anecdotal information we need from other states. But the Mississippi, here's why Mississippi was very important to me. The fact that a conservative state like Mississippi, that is more conservative than Indiana could ever want to be, could pass in states like Alabama. They have passed this stuff, and we should be conscious of it.
It seems like Indiana's always at the very last of anything that's kind of it shows any human progress at all. Why is that? Why do you think it is? I have a theory about that, but what's your idea about that?
Well, hold on a second. I think I got disconnected, but here, are you there? I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're here.
I'll hear you.
So here's what I think happens in Indiana, and this is Indiana as a whole. We have these conservative values that tend to be more radical than other states, and we have these fringe issues like, you know, the gun issue, for example, that's coming up right now, and then the the whole thing about, teachers in school and teaching kids. Indiana has always been on the fringe on a lot of these issues. And unfortunately, it tends to permeate in the leadership. So what you have is you got all these people down at the lower level who are not in leadership, who don't have the power to get these issues on the floor. You know what I mean? So you have these issues like cannabis, you have issues like guns, issues like teacher salary that never make it to the forefront because the leadership are still stuck trying to make sure that they support their fringe people.
Okay. So the way you were talking about Houston and Bray, they're the ones who can kind of say whether even there's a vote on any of these bills.
They are absolutely, they're the ones who make the assignment for chairmanship. They're the ones who assign the legislation to certain committees. For example, my bill for cannabis should have been assigned to either public policy or a health committee, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, he wasn't having that. He assigned it to Rules Committee, Rod Bray does, that he chairs. Because he didn't want to give those chairmen the opportunity to hear my legislation.
So he
that's
wanted
what
to
he
make sure
did.
that it was never even going to get on the floor.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So that's
We
why we need to get out and register to vote, make phone calls. How would you say would be the best way to get to Bray and Houston? Like phone calls, emails? What do you recommend?
Oh, I think he's frozen again.
Oh,
No, I'm here.
There he
Okay.
is. There he is.
sorry.
So here's the phone calls are good, emails are good, but also get the best calls I ever receive are people who say, I live at 3641 North Pennsylvania. Now I know where that's at. That's in my district, right?
Okay.
So if you say to me, hey, Senator, this is how I want you to vote, and I voted for you, and I would love your support on this. It's going to be very hard for me to say no to you. You're a constituent.
Okay.
I voted for you. I told my mom to vote for you. I told my brother, my uncle, my cousin.
Mhm. So that's what you were saying. Find our people that live in their areas, have them reach out. Okay. And
Absolutely.
you know what? I found that to be true because I sent out a lot of emails and phone calls and I got nothing but form letters back. But when I reached out and I said, hey, I work in your district and I live in, it was amazing how different of a response you get. All of a sudden they're like, oh, here's a personalized email, or here's my town hall, come see me here. So yeah, definitely if you're in their districts, please reach out. Just let them know this is what I want. I don't need a return phone call. But I want cannabis legal. We have to let them know.
And I would love to have this be a topic at your next town hall so that we can talk about it, so that we can get your opinion, and we can have people there that have an interest in this to talk to you about it.
Mhm. Definitely make a showing. That's why I don't know if you heard about our Cannabis Coalition. We're getting together with a bunch of groups here in Indiana to try to all band together. So if we can all make a big presence at their town hall meetings, do you think that will make a difference to them or not?
Well, yes. And here's your example of how I know this is going to work. The legislation that we had this year regarding schools and what kids are learning in school, that didn't come from people who live inside the district. That came from groups that came from across the Midwest and went to school board meetings and said, this is what we want. We're tired of this, and this is what we want. That's what sparked all these debates. So if you could do that, hey, where's cannabis? Where are you at on cannabis? Every Republican, every Democrat, where are you at on cannabis legalization? Ask them that question.
Okay.
So when they hold an event, we ought to be there.
Yeah. And
Absolutely.
always, to our viewers, we always tell them, be very respectful, be kind. You know, I think just wearing the shirts, either whether it be an I normal shirt, whether it just be legalized cannabis, what your group, whatever, just show up in masses. And I think that'll make a huge statement.
Red
We
for
had-
Ed is a perfect example. When those teachers showed up at the
Oh, yeah.
State House, they got a raise out of it. Remember?
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
our whole work, like we couldn't all go down there, and we're not even teachers, but we all wore red at our job that day. I mean,
Yeah.
it was supported throughout the whole state. Yes. Maybe we need a green day where we all wear green.
Hey,
I
have
think
you thought about introductions to like the farm bureaus of Indiana or people like that in the rural area?
Well, you know, it's fine because I'm up north of Fort Wayne. So I'm in a rural area. We live on a little 40-acre farm. So, you know, that's my area. And we were actually just me and Neil and Angel, who was our guru behind all of this. We're talking about that. I said, you know, has anybody gone to them with statistics for how much these farmers are making? Because a friend of mine owns a farm up in Michigan. His third year, he was making over $1 million a year. And he only owned, I think it was 7 acres. So,
It's unbelievable.
And
I think they're more concerned right now about with hemp than they are with medical or recreational cannabis.
Yeah, but remember the hemp issue. I always see it's kind of like that's what Indiana does. We give you a little slice of the bread and we say, okay, we're giving you something to eat. Well, the whole loaf is we should have hemp and cannabis.
Yes.
Hemp can be used in manufacturing. It can be used in certain combination of treatments. But medical marijuana, medical cannabis can be used as well. This is not rocket science we're talking about here.
That's right.
And with hemp, I mean, because we looked into growing hemp and they said before you plant one seed, you better have a contract ready with somebody. So there's a lot more involved with the hemp industry. You can't just plant some plants and, you know, it's a lot deeper than just being a hemp farmer. So to give our farmers up here, all the farmers I know in my area have a full-time job, and then they come home and they farm till midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. I mean, that shouldn't be how it is. That's how my grandpa did it. That's how all the farmers I know, unless you own thousands and thousands of acres. Now, if we had marijuana, these guys could have a choice. Even if they don't want to, you can still do your corn, your soybean, you know, do your rotation, but give them the choice to make some decent money, be able to stay home with their families. That's one of my biggest passions is.
Well, here's the other thing that I want to tell you about, especially if we do medical marijuana. It has to be grown inside, okay?
Yes.
And here's the reality of it. You're going to need a lot of acreage in order to put up the facilities to grow this, and you grow year round.
Yep.
It's not like being outdoors where you have to wait and you have to turn your crop to grow a different kind of feed or some kind of corn and soybean, and you know, you grow the same thing year round. This is a tremendous asset to the farmers because they are the ones with the access to the land that is going to be needed to put up 1 million square foot building.
Exactly.
And so from my standpoint, the farmers should be 110% behind this. You need to be talking to the Farm Bureau of Indiana and ask why they're not on it.
Are they not on board? We haven't really touched on that. Well, like I said, we just had this kind of brainstorming last night about like future farmers of America, but they're so old school. Do you
But
think?
Are they?
When well, it's been a few years
I
since
don't
I was
think
in
they-
high school, but
No. They are not. See, everybody makes that assumption about the farmer. So you would be surprised at the number of farmers who understand the financial benefit of doing this.
okay.
And I'll give you an example. What Florida did is because they have huge orange growers down there, right? It's the,
Right.
the orange state. So in their legislation, in order to have a license, you have to have an orange farmer on your team.
Okay.
Now, let's think about this. If in Indiana you went to a hog farmer and you said, hey, if you support this, we can find a way to make sure you have that we have hog farmers, corn growers, soybean growers as part of the ownership team and all the licenses that we have for growth. Oh my God, you got them right there.
Right. Oh
And
yeah.
so that's how they did it in other states. I mean, you think orange farmers have some kind of unique standing to be able to grow cannabis? No, they knew if they got the orange farmers on their side, that would affect their legislators.
That's a great idea. We haven't heard it that angle yet, so I really appreciate you sharing that with us.
Yeah.
We tried talking with a couple of farm organizations several years ago, and they were much more interested in hemp at that time. Maybe it's time to revisit that.
Well, and I know, like where I live in a very rural area. The best place to get with anybody is you go to your local diner at 6 a.m. on any day, and you think I'm kidding. I'm not, and I can drive you to ours here in my little town, and there they all are. They're all lined up. They're talking business. They're shooting the breeze, but that's where you'll find them.
I grew up in Marion, Indiana. You are 100% correct.
Yep.
And I want you to think about this too, from the support from the small towns. You talked about job creation. Cannabis creates jobs, new jobs.
Oh yeah.
Technology jobs. It produces construction, real estate value goes up. People who work in the cannabis industry can afford to live in a decent neighborhood, and they can afford to send their kids to college, and they can afford. There's so many benefits. And remember, the thing that I tell people, if we wait until the federal government does something, then you know as well as I do that once the federal government says you're going to do it, they're going to want their piece of the pie too. So we lose by waiting. We lose by waiting on the federal government to, for example, send, let's say they classify marijuana as a Schedule II drug, which means it can be regulated. We lose because you believe me, they're going to want their percentage of whatever's produced and sold.
Absolutely. Now, Senator Taylor, quick question. What do you think of like just kind of doing a click and paste of, say, Michigan's model? Or do you think that we need to like learn from everybody and do our own? Or
listen, the one thing that I can say, and I don't know I haven't delved deep into Michigan, but you could pick, listen, there's 37 models out there.
yes.
Some of them do it well, some of them do it terrible. You got testing. How often should you test this stuff? You've got vertical versus horizontal. Should you let somebody regulate it? Should you let the owners regulate from the ground to the retail? Or do you separate it like other states have, where you have growers here, you have distributors here, you have retailers here? How do you structure it? That's basically how you do it is based on what you think is best for your citizenry. But there's so many models out there that taking one, especially from a state like Michigan, that I think is what, 6 or 7 years? No, not even that. 3 or 4 years in, right? You want to look at other states to see what some states do good on testing. They do very well. But some states don't test, which I think is terrible.
Right.
So I don't like the vertical model. I like the horizontal model because it fits like a lot of people don't know this about our alcohol industry in Indiana. You only have one distributor. Well, it's called a 3-tier system. You've got producers like Miller Coors, Anheuser-Busch, all the big distributors of beer, you can't, if you want to buy beer in your neighborhood, there's only one distributor that you can buy that gets to sell to the Walmarts, to the liquor stores,
Right.
to the wine company. It's called a 3-tier system. So when you have horizontal, you have the manufacturer of cannabis, you've got the distributor, you want to make sure it gets to the retail places, and then you have the retail. We already have that structure in place for alcohol right now. So it'd be old hat for us to do it here in Indiana the same way. And I like that model.
Okay.
I was wondering about that when there was the discussion last fall about a cannabis commission. I still think that a cannabis commission needs to be established to make sure that things are done properly, particularly in production of medical grade cannabis. You've got to, I mean, you're growing a medicine. There's certain things that you have to do to ensure that quality is there. What do you think about the Cannabis Commission in Indiana? Do you think that's needed? What's your opinion of it?
Absolutely, it's needed. And the most compelling argument is the fact that we already have a commission. We have the Alcohol and Tobacco Commission. So
do you think they dovetail?
We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We've already got a regulatory system in place. Now, the only thing that's different is we don't have testing at the local level, at the state level. We can do that. But alcohol is regulated by the Alcohol and Tobacco Commission. You can't just pop up a liquor store in the neighborhood. You got to have a license.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be real about it. If we can regulate alcohol, we damn sure could regulate cannabis.
Absolutely. Because Michigan just had, oh man, they've had a bunch of recalls due to mold and this and that, but it shouldn't have ever got to the dispensaries.
Because they didn't do testing accurately.
Right.
How do you let molded cannabis get to the retail store?
Yep. Especially when it's medical.
Yeah, you can't do that.
Yeah.
That can't be allowed. Those testing labs have to be on it.
Yeah.
Yep.
And there's no reason they can't be.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, we test the bejeebers out. I say, every 1,000 pounds. Now people will be like, oh no, we can't do that. Well, in the beginning we can, and then we could look at it later on.
And I think that's what happened in Michigan. They're playing catch up because they didn't have like a cannabis coalition or regulatory agency set up to begin with. So they've just been constantly playing catch up, and kind of paying the price.
But they've got a reasonably good program going.
They do now.
One of the things that we have to be careful of is that we don't overtax it. That was Illinois' problem. They overtaxed it, and we want to get away from an underground economy. The black market is not a good place, not a good way to do business. And if we make it so that it's going to cost just as much, to go to a dispensary and buy something, and you're going to pay the same price to get it from your friend Bob, whatever, and you've got you've got to have a reason to go to the dispensary and do it legally.
Well, and like Senator Taylor was saying, if it does someday get federally, they're going to want their piece of the pie. So if the states are completely maxed out and then the Fed takes theirs, like you said, Neil, it's just going to drive everybody back underground.
Illinois has 7 levels of taxation on cannabis.
Ouch.
That's way too much.
Yeah. Now, Senator Taylor, what are your views on where tax money should go?
Well, first of all, it's got to go to our mental health crisis. If you're going to have medical, we've got to spend more money on mental health. Our jails are crowded. Our jails have become systems of mental health facilities.
Yes.
And you talk to our sheriffs and they'll tell you they would love to have a mental health facility built right next to their facility for the jail. because people are struggling right now mentally with COVID and all the other things. So first, mental health. Then we have to do some kind of social programs to get these people who have been subject to all these strenuous laws associated with the war on drugs, to make sure that we give them opportunities to reacclimate to the community, right? You can't have these things that produce revenue for the state of Indiana and continue down the same path that we've been forever. So you got to get the social programs. And then last but not least, we got to get education back to funding where it should be. So first, mental health services, which I don't think anybody could argue we need a tremendous influx of revenue in that resources in that area. Second, to social welfare programs, and third, to boost up our education funding for public schools.
Okay. Now, question, one thing that I think was Senator Ford had talked to us about getting people out to vote and registering people to vote. Another thing that we hadn't really, kind of put on the back burner. Do you think people's voting patterns are changing?
Well, yeah, I don't know if I can say this in the country, yes. In Indiana, yes. But here's the problem with Indiana. We are so gerrymandered that it looks like we're 90, 75, 85% Republican state. We're not. All you got to do is look at the number of votes that are cast, and you'll see that it's more like 60-40. But because so many districts are running unopposed in the general election, you don't see the number of voters that turn out. When we get a competitive race, yeah, they turn out.
Okay.
Who would have ever thought that Georgia would vote for Joe Biden?
Right.
Arizona, Joe Biden.
Mm-hmm.
Who would have ever thought? And don't forget, Indiana moved that way one time. 2008, Indiana went for Barack Obama.
Right.
Mhm.
So yes, patterns change, but also so do ideas. And we've got to become more ideology. We got to have different ideas in Indiana.
How do you think the voting is going to affect the General Assembly next year?
Well, from my standpoint, I think there's going to be more fringe people in the supermajority. I think in the House they have 26 primary races. In the Senate, I think they have 3 in the Republican side. We have, I believe, 2 in the Senate and maybe 1 in the House for Democrats. So you could see a complete shift in the ideology of the supermajority just basically in one midterm election. Especially if the House, if let's say 10 or 15 members of their incumbents get knocked off in the primary in the House of Representatives. I mean, it changes the whole dynamic.
That would be huge.
Yeah, but here's I'm not scared of that, because I think once people get into the groove of things, they start figuring out how things work. I think mindsets change. You might not give them their first session, but by their second session, they're like, hey, I didn't know it worked this way.
Okay. I would believe that. Probably take a few years to get used to what was going on.
Yeah, and I think we're going to move. I think people are these fringe ideas, all this stuff that the left and the right are doing on the fringe. Indiana's just not the place for that. We've always been this middle of the road kind of state, and unfortunately, the national climate has created these fringe ideas. And I think people are going to get a message this election year from the people, from the voters, that we don't want this kind of stuff in Indiana. I mean, there was a time, I hate to keep going back to 2008 because it was so long ago, it seems like, but remember that same year that Barack Obama won Indiana, so did Mitch Daniels.
Okay.
That's Indiana. That's the real Indiana.
Okay.
We saw in the 2016 election, especially, and then 2018. Well, we had seen it before, that it was just, oh well, I like Eric Holcomb for governor, so bam, just pull the Republican Party lever without thought to other. We saw a lot of that. That's not a good way to vote, is it?
Neil, I don't think anybody said Governor Holcomb's a good way to go. I'm just kidding.
Well,
Sorry.
enough people did because he won, you know.
That's true.
Well, he
That's
won it. He won against a unfunded Democrat candidate with no message.
Mhm.
But you bring up a good point. Eric Holcomb will not be on the ballot in 24.
Yay! Oh,
And remember, there's going to be probably 3 or 4 people run for governor's office, and you're going to have Suzanne Crouch. You're going to have Mike Braun, and you're probably going to have Trey Hollingsworth.
okay.
And so this could be an issue that if I was Indiana Normal and we haven't done anything by 24 now, I believe we will. I think, you know, and again, I might be more optimistic than I should be. But we got 37 states. We don't want to be number 50.
Right.
Nobody wants to be number 50. But you've got an opportunity to actually divide the candidates into where they are on this issue. I think it's going to, if they let it last until 24, this will be a huge issue on who people vote for, especially if Kentucky goes before us.
oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
It'd
Definitely.
be completely surrounded.
They're headed there. So how important do you think having a governor that's pro-cannabis is?
Oh, it's very important. For a governor candidate to come out and say, I'm pro-cannabis,
Mhm.
I mean, it totally changed the dynamic of the leadership and the structure of the House and the Senate.
Okay. Do they
Because
try
you
to
put it, go ahead.
do they try to follow kind of what the governor
No,
wants?
I wouldn't say that.
Okay.
What it does is it creates an environment where the legislators know that if they stick their neck out on the line and vote for this,
Uh-huh.
that the governor's going to sign the bill. The last
Okay.
thing you want to do, and Eric Holcomb has already said he will not sign a cannabis bill. So the last thing these legislators want to do is put their neck out on the line for cannabis, knowing that it's going to get vetoed by the governor. Because then they have to come back twice and override his veto.
Okay.
And
Which
we've been
I'm-
told before, though, that a veto override on cannabis, if it made it that far, would probably work. How do you feel
but-
about that?
Well, I don't think they have the fortitude to get a veto override. They'd rather go away and not even come to the table. I don't think that they would veto. I don't think they would override his veto.
Okay.
Seems to me that would be a good reason to vote against somebody that doesn't want to take the will of the people to the floor.
Mhm.
Well, that's why I'm saying it becomes a very good issue for 2024.
Mm-hmm.
But I
Yeah.
seem to think that during the budget session next year, Eric Holcomb is going to change his mind on this issue.
Really?
Really? Do you think he'll come out publicly and say that?
Listen, if it keeps falling like it is, he's going, and if he wants to run for U.S. Senate, he's going to support cannabis.
Okay. That's what we're all hoping.
That makes sense. It makes a lot of sense.
Definitely. Definitely.
Uh,
Well, I cannot
we-
thank you enough, Senator Taylor. Is there any last words you'd like to give to us? We really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, let me say this. First of all, thank you to Indiana Normal for all of your support during all this in the information that we provided. I've actually got a group of college students at Butler University are looking into all these medical cannabis studies to try to find some things to provide us information. And as I've said before, I don't think we're on the different pages, even though some people want recreation versus medical. I think Indiana has always been slow, so we move methodically. I think if we go to medical first, we'll probably move into recreational quickly afterwards. But I think it's going to take a medical understanding first, so people can get used to it and don't be scared of the alligator in the mud puddle like we typically get in Indiana, and then move into the recreational piece. So I think there's a lot of people who want to see recreational move in Indiana. I think that's a heavier lift in the medical part. And then we've got to work on making sure that we use the resources that we get from this to do good things for the citizens of the state of Indiana. So not only should it be important what we do in regards to cannabis, but how we spend the tax revenue.
Definitely, because we've talked a lot in the past about like impacted areas, people that have been impacted. There's different racial groups that have been impacted more. And we've talked a lot about, we think a lot of that money should be funneled back into those areas to help them, get expungements. Because even if the expungement is on, say, oh yeah, I'm thinking it just how Indiana is, you still have to hire a lawyer to make that happen or do the paperwork. What do you think about tax money going that way?
Well, we already do it now. The Supreme Court, if you go on the Supreme Court's website right now for expungement, you find form documents that were paid for by taxpayer dollars. It's not like we don't do that already. And I agree with you. That we should use resources to hire legal counsel if needed for those people who have criminal backgrounds associated with being charged with marijuana. Yes, that would be a great thing to do. And then think about what that'll do, again, for the mental health part of it, if we use it towards mental health. I mean, look, your community, every community in the state could use more mental health services in their area.
We have none. We have none.
Right. Yeah, you do. It's called the jail.
Right. Pretty much. Yeah. And then if you can find a mental health facility, and I don't mean inept in a bad way. I think they just don't have the resources. They don't have the staffing. They don't, to be able to actually help someone more than just a couple days and send them back. Then they go to jail. I'm with you on the mental health. We definitely need to address that in Indiana.
This society, not only here in Indiana, but across the United States, is not conducive to good, solid mental health anymore. It's pretty whacked out sometimes.
Right. It is. And it's scary and it's sad. It really is sad to see people just falling by the wayside that shouldn't be there. But again, Senator Taylor, we know you're so busy right now when everything's in session and you're working from your car, you're going from this meeting to this meeting, and we really appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
And to our viewers last time, indiananormal.org. Hit up our website, check out some of our news articles. We're always putting new ones on there, updating. Definitely. And again, go to iga.in.gov, find your legislatures, find who you need to contact, because you'd be surprised when a committee chair could be in your district and he or she is going to take your call or your letter more to heart. So we really appreciate everybody watching tonight. Senator Taylor, Neil, it was great having you all here. Everybody,
thank you, Denise. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.